What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show, and today I have had an epiphany. I have been riding around on this 2022 Super Duke Evo R right here, and I used to think that a motorcycle making 100 to 120 horsepower was perfect, and that you don't need 180 or 200 horsepower. It's too much for the street. And after spending a lot of time with this bike, I've come to realize that's not entirely true. There really is no such thing as too much horsepower. And what was really separating a bike like this from one of the 100 to 120 horse bikes in my mind was something completely different. And I didn't realize that until I was riding this around. So let's hit the road and talk about it.
So, slow bike fast or fast bike slow. This is one of those age-old adages that I've really, the more I look back, the more I've flip-flopped on this idea, because I see where they're coming from, right? It's been a lot of fun for me to absolutely flog the tar out of my Sportster. In fact, a lot of people who ride with me when I'm on multiple bikes, specifically when I'm on my Sportster or one of my slower motorcycles, and then I get on something like this, or my Tuono, or the CBR, people notice that I ride very differently. I'm still riding sporty on these bigger motorcycles, but I ride a little bit more cautiously, with a little bit more respect for the machine, whereas I have limited to no respect for my Sportster. That bike lives its life at between 5,000 and 5,500 RPM almost all the time. And it's fun, right? It's fun to absolutely beat the snot out of a motorcycle because you feel like you're going really quick. Even though, you know, you might look down and you're at the red line and you're going 50 or 60 miles an hour. And there's some joy to be had there. No word of a lie, I have had some really good times on some slow motorcycles. But then again, I'll get on a motorcycle like the Duke or on my Tuono, and I'm just like, you know what? I feel the need. I feel that need for speed. Let's go. Drop a gear or not, and then just absolutely accelerate. Just punch it. Go into hyperspace and have some fun. I have yet to take a motorcycle like this to the racetrack just because I've been timid and I'm nervous about experiencing all of this power in a place where I can really play with it. That's something that does have me just a hair on the cautious side. Oh shit. So we've had a ton of rain recently. We had those massive floods, and it was actually like natural disaster levels of water. But I was curious, and that's actually why we're on this road. I wanted to see if they've recharged this lake, and they have. This used to all be completely bone dry. There used to be no water here. Don't get me wrong, it's still very low, but I have not seen water out here in a long time, and that's actually really neat.
Now I need to take a second to interrupt this rant and let you guys know about the sponsor of today's video, you. A huge shout out goes out to every single one of you guys watching these videos, because without you, I would not be able to do this. It doesn't work if you guys don't watch the videos. An even bigger shout out goes to these folks right here who have been supporting the channel, joining the YouTube memberships or over on Patreon. You guys have not just been keeping the lights on at my place, you have been putting food on the table over at Mario the editor's house. And did you know that editors actually need to eat food too? I actually just figured that out when Mario told me that I had to pay him. If you're out there and you want to support the channel directly, you can go down to Patreon or join the YouTube memberships where you'll get early access to videos, you'll get behind the scenes looks, you'll be able to join the Discord, as well as at the top tier, you get an extra video every month that doesn't get released to the public. I know it's kind of a YouTuber cliche at this point, but seriously, thank you guys. This does not work without you, and give yourself a big pat on the back before we get back out on the road. You deserve it.
So anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, sometimes you just want some low IQ fun, and you want to go fast. And I've really struggled with, I've often said that for me, the ideal amount of power for the streets around about 100 to 120 horsepower. I've widened that to, you know, maybe 140 in some cases, and all the way down to like 70. And I still believe to a certain extent that that range, as meaningless as a range that wide is accurate. But I think I've always kind of thought that the money spot was like 90 to 120 horsepower. Plenty of power to have fun, to really play with the bike, and then it's not too much so that you're stuck behind a Honda Accord with 180 horsepower just being like, why am I here? Why is my front brake switch not light on? Interesting. That's actually going to get to one of the points that I'm going to make later on. So I said that my opinion on this has kind of changed, and it has, and I've reached a point now where I'm just like, you know what? Who cares? Who cares? There is no right amount of power for the street. There really isn't. I don't believe in too much anymore. I just don't. I really don't. Because it's really going to come down to you. For example, 650E, he's got his supercharged Ninja H2, which is making just an absolute biblical amount of power. I think it's like 350 or something like that. And yet he's still riding it on the street. You've got guys on turbo boosters that are riding him on the street. This thing's got 180 horsepower and I'm riding it on the street. I've got 140 horse on my Tuono. I've got 66 on my Harley. It really kind of comes down to what you're doing with the power and what you're looking to get out of it, and that's not something that I can tell you. And so at this point, I'm just like, you know what? Who cares? Who cares how much power you have? There's moments, if I pick my moments right, that I can use a lot of the power on this bike. I can't use all of it because I'm just not that good a rider. But I can use a lot of it. There's times when I realize that I'm just not using nearly anything. I'm just poodling along. But then there's times I get on my Sportster and I use 100%, literally 100% of what that bike can give me. There's times and places for everything. So the question is, should you run out now? Now that I've said there's no point, and you could run whatever you want on the street. Just go have fun. Go do silly stuff. Does that mean you should run out and grab the most insane motorcycle? I mean, sure, go for it. Why not? Life is short. Go make a mistake. But there are some things that I would like to caution you about with these faster motorcycles. And this is the thing that I've really grown to realize. The reason why I've always said that 120 horsepower is about where you want to be, is like the ideal number for the street. I realize now why I used to say that. And it's not necessarily the power, because this thing has a ton of it, but it also can deliver it very predictably. Really, what sets this bike apart from a bike in the 100 to 120 horsepower range is the level of technology. And that's not something I realized until I owned this thing and I spent some real time with it. Don't get me wrong, there are some 100 horsepower, 120 horsepower range motorcycles that just have all the tech on it. They've got active suspension, they've got all the stuff. Crazy dialable rider modes and everything, for sure. But by and large, you only get that insane level of technology on these kind of motorcycles. On the hyper naked motorcycles, on the leader bikes, the race replica, you know, these bleeding edge motorcycles come packed with all of that bleeding edge tech. And it's starting to trickle down to the less powerful bikes. But right now, less powerful bikes are in a sweet spot where they have all the technology you actually need and none of the technology that's going to give you weird gremlins down the line. So for example, a weird gremlin I've noticed today on my Super Duke, it flashing front brake light switch or front brake switch. I have no idea what that is. I mean, obviously something's going on with my front brake switch, but most motorcycles, I mean, the front brake switch doesn't do a whole lot. The only other thing that it does other than turn on the light is maybe disable cruise control. But usually it's just a light switch on less powerful motorcycles, you know what I mean? And if it's just a light switch, there's less for it to fail. My suspension thinks for itself, but God help me if something goes wrong with the suspension. And sure, you can get some fancy motorcycles, some hyper naked bikes that don't have this level of technology. But it's rare to find it on 100 to 120 horsepower bike. Again, that's another reason why I think those bikes are just in the butter zone, because they're not jam-packed. They're not absolutely shoehorned in with all of this trickle-down GP technology. And don't get me wrong, I have had so much fun with the anti-dive on this bike. The fact that my suspension is smart enough that it can sense when I'm getting on the brakes and when that suspension is compressing, and it can pump up the compression in the springs to make sure that that front end dives a whole lot less. I have noticed that. That is a feature I have noticed, even though I'm just a klutz on this thing. And that is very, very cool, but that's not something I need. I'm not doing silly enough stuff to need it. Really, all I need is just a couple of rider modes, a little bit of wheelie and traction control, and then a quick shifter up and down. And that's kind of it. Cruise control's a nice addition, but you can get away with, a throttle lock. And honestly, I'm kind of ashamed it's taken me this long to realize why I like that range of motorcycles, kind of the middleweight range. It really is down to a perfect melding of usable fun power and usable, not over-the-top technology. Just enough for it to matter, but not enough for you to be like constantly thinking about it or wondering why your motorcycle is telling you that your front brake switch is having a problem. Like, seriously, what the fuck, Super Duke? I genuinely have no idea what the front brake switch does on this motorcycle, but I can only imagine that it's tied into cruise control, that it's tied into the brakes, that it's tied into the anti-dive, that it's tied into all of these systems on the bike. Now, whether or not this technology is actually useful is a whole other conversation, and it's one that I plan to have a little bit further down the line, because that's one where I also think I've developed a more nuanced take on it. But as for power, man, just get what makes you happy. Get stuff that's fun. Get something exciting. Just know that when you're co-signing on a bike like this, not only are you dealing with a lot more technology, but you're dealing with bigger maintenance numbers too. I mean, not only is working on this motor going to be more complicated and all the technology around it, but this thing eats rear tires for breakfast. So, again, it all's going to come down to what you're looking for out of a motorcycle. But at this point in my riding career, honestly, I've developed the idea that there's a place for every bike. There really is. There's no motorcycle that doesn't make sense in some form or fashion. I can see somebody justifying just about any motorcycle in their garage. If you want that bleeding edge power, go for it. If you just want to wring the neck of a bike out on your favorite twisty road, get a smaller one or some good life insurance. But honestly, and you know what? Maybe at the end of the day, that's just me. This is all just me being like, yeah, I'm making excuses for the fact that I own a Super Duke now, and I have to like justify this to myself constantly because I do just have a tire eater. I don't know. I like to think that really what has happened is my mind has expanded. And I'm not just trying to make excuses to make sense of why I have this thing in second gear at 35 miles an hour down a twisty road behind a ladder truck. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think is the right amount of power for the street? Have you sort of experienced this shift that I've gone through? Because this is a conversation we've had before on the channel. And it's one that continues to evolve. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.